The interview room felt smaller than it actually was. The pale fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead, casting a dull glow over the gray metal table that divided the room into two silent territories. On one side sat Detective Aaron Cole, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers loosely interlocked, his eyes quietly studying the man across from him. On the other side was Daniel Mercer, calm, composed, and frustratingly cooperative. For the past 4 hours, Mercer had answered every question with a smooth confidence that bordered on rehearsed. His voice never wavered, his posture never tightened, and his eyes rarely blinked longer than a moment. To an untrained observer, he looked like a man with absolutely nothing to hide. But Aaron had been doing this job long enough to know that innocence rarely looked this polished. The case had been simple on paper, but impossible in practice. 3 weeks earlier, a young woman named Claire Donovan had vanished on her way home from work. Her car had been found abandoned near a riverside parking lot, her phone left neatly in the passenger seat, keys still in the ignition. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no ransom demand, just an eerie absence where a life used to be. Investigators had combed through hours of surveillance footage until one image caught their attention: a silver sedan idling briefly behind Claire's car just minutes before she disappeared. The license plate traced back to Daniel Mercer. And yet, Mercer had an explanation for everything. He claimed he had simply parked there to answer a phone call. He said he never noticed Claire, never saw anyone enter or leave her vehicle, and left after less than 2 minutes. Phone records confirmed he had indeed received a call during that time. GPS data placed him near the parking lot exactly when he said he was. Every detail lined up so neatly that it almost felt insulting. Aaron leaned back slightly in his chair, letting the silence stretch between them. Silence was a tool, one Mercer seemed unusually comfortable with. Most suspects eventually filled the quiet with nervous chatter, but Mercer simply sat there, breathing steadily, occasionally glancing at the clock on the wall. "You've been very helpful," Aaron finally said in a calm tone, sliding a photo across the table. It was Claire Donovan, smiling brightly in a picture taken from her workplace ID badge. Pretty strange situation, though, right? Being at the same place, same time when someone disappears? Mercer barely glanced at the photo. "Coincidences happen, Detective." That answer had come before. Aaron nodded slowly, as if accepting it. "Sure, they do." Another stretch of silence followed. Aaron tapped his pen lightly against the table, not aggressively, just enough to create a soft, rhythmic sound. Mercer's eyes flicked down to the pen once, then back up. Psychology had taught Aaron something important over the years. People expect certain kinds of questions. They prepare for them. They rehearse answers while driving to the station, while waiting in the lobby, even while sitting silently across the table. But the questions people prepare for are almost always about what happened. Very few prepare for questions about how they experienced it. Aaron leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice just enough to pull Mercer's attention closer. "Daniel," he said casually, "when you were sitting in your car that night, waiting for that phone call..." Mercer nodded once. "Yes?" Aaron held his gaze, his expression neutral. "What was Claire wearing when she walked past you?" The shift was microscopic, so small that most people in the room would have missed it, but Aaron didn't miss it. For the first time in 4 hours, Daniel Mercer froze. Not dramatically, not obviously, just a pause that lasted half a second too long. His eyes blinked once, then again, slightly faster than before. A tiny muscle in his jaw tightened, like a reflex his body couldn't quite hide. Because Daniel Mercer had already said something very important earlier. He said he never saw her. And yet now, faced with the sudden, unexpected question, his brain had to do something dangerous. It had to choose between maintaining the story he had rehearsed or answering the question that his instincts had already begun processing. Aaron didn't move, didn't repeat the question. He simply watched. Inside Mercer's mind, something had just shifted, and the room suddenly felt much smaller than before. But what Detective Aaron Cole didn't yet realize was that the single question he had just asked would not only unravel Daniel Mercer's carefully constructed story, it would unravel the entire case. For a brief moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel Mercer's eyes shifted away from Aaron and drifted toward the blank wall behind him, as if the answer might somehow be written there. The pause wasn't long enough to be dramatic, but it was long enough for someone trained to notice the tiny fractures that appear when a rehearsed story begins to strain under pressure. Aaron remained completely still, his face calm, giving Mercer nothing to react to. Silence, once again, was doing the heavy lifting. Mercer cleared his throat softly and leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, a subtle change from the relaxed posture he had been maintaining for hours. "I wouldn't know," he finally said with a faint shrug. "Like I told you before, I never saw her." His answer came smoothly, but the timing was wrong. People who tell the truth usually answer questions about what they didn't see almost instantly. There's no mental reconstruction required. But Mercer needed a second, just enough time for his mind to slam the brakes on the image that had flashed there without permission. Aaron tapped his pen once more, slow and rhythmic. "Right," he said quietly, nodding. "You mentioned that." He picked up the photograph of Claire Donovan and studied it as if he were looking at it for the first time. The picture showed her standing outside her office building, wearing a light-colored coat and holding a coffee cup, the wind slightly lifting her hair. Aaron slid the photograph back onto the table between them, not pushing it toward Mercer this time, just letting it sit there in plain view. "Funny thing about memory," Aaron continued, his tone conversational, almost absent-minded. "Sometimes our brains fill in details even when we think we weren't paying attention." Mercer said nothing. Aaron leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table, his tone now quiet but carrying a different kind of precision. "You were parked behind her car for almost 2 minutes. Your headlights would have been facing the driver's side door. If she walked by, even in your peripheral vision, you'd catch something. Movement, color, maybe just a shadow." Mercer's jaw flexed barely, noticeable unless you were looking directly for it. "I was on the phone, looking down." Aaron nodded again, still calm, still patient. "Of course." Another quiet pause settled over the room, but this one felt different. The air had shifted. Mercer was no longer perfectly comfortable in the silence. His fingers began tapping lightly against his forearm, an unconscious rhythm that mirrored the pen Aaron had been tapping earlier. Aaron noticed. He reached into a thin folder beside him and pulled out a printed still frame from the parking lot surveillance footage. It showed Mercer's silver sedan parked behind Claire's car. The license plate glowed faintly in the corner of the image. "You know what always fascinates me?" Aaron said as he placed the image on the table. "Moments right before something happens." Mercer looked at the picture, but didn't touch it. Aaron pointed to the timestamp. 8:42 p.m. That's when you pull into the lot. His finger moved slightly along the frame. "And according to your phone records, your call starts at 8:43. Mercer nodded cautiously. "That's right." Aaron leaned back in his chair again, tilting his head slightly as if considering something. "Here's the strange part," he said slowly. Mercer's eyes lifted. Aaron slid another printed still frame onto the table. This one was captured 30 seconds later. Claire Donovan was visible in the frame now, stepping out of her car. "She arrived after you," Aaron said calmly. For the first time since the questioning began, Mercer's brow tightened. Aaron watched the realization move across Mercer's face. Not panic, not yet, but calculation. The timeline Mercer had been relying on had quietly shifted beneath him. "If she got there after you," Aaron continued softly, "then you wouldn't have been parked behind an empty car." Mercer said nothing. Aaron let the words sit there. "Which means," he added gently, "if you were looking down at your phone like you said—" He paused just long enough for Mercer's mind to start filling in the conclusion. "You wouldn't even know that her car was there." The room fell silent again. This time, Mercer didn't look at the wall. He looked directly at the photograph of Claire Donovan lying on the table. And in that tiny movement, the involuntary focus on a face he had supposedly never seen that night, Aaron felt something click quietly into place.
because Daniel Mercer had just made a mistake far more revealing than any confession. He had reacted to someone who, according to his own story, should have been a complete stranger. Aaron slowly folded his hands together. "Daniel," he said quietly. Mercer looked up. Aaron's eyes didn't move. "So I'm going to ask you that question again." The detective leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but now carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. "When Claire Donovan walked past your car," a long pause filled the space between them, "what was she wearing?" And this time, Daniel Mercer didn't answer right away, because somewhere in the carefully constructed version of events inside his mind, the truth had just begun forcing its way in, and once it did, the rest of the story would start collapsing faster than he could hold it together. What Aaron didn't yet realize was that Mercer's next words wouldn't just expose a lie, they would expose something far worse. Daniel Mercer stared at the photograph on the table for several seconds,